Morning, my name's Simon. Welcome to Bennett's BikeSocial. Welcome to sunny Portugal. And welcome to the launch of Triumph's eagerly anticipated 2022 Tiger 1200.
Welcome to the first few miles on Triumph's 2022 Tiger 1200 launch. And where do we start? There is so much to talk about. Last night I asked Triumph staff, is there any part of this new Tiger 1200 that is carried over from the existing Tiger 1200? And they said, oh yeah, there's a few fasteners and some bolts. That's about it. There is no major componentry carryover as far as we know. So it is a new Tiger 1200. So there are lots to talk about, lots of models and changes and gadgets and stuff to talk about, but I think the first thing is if we just talk about the things that are common to all the bikes in the Tiger range. And the first thing of course is the engine. So we have an 1160cc inline triple making 140 bhp at 9,000 rpm and 96 pound-foot of torque at 7,000 rpm. Which you will note, it's kind of, to say that it's derived from the same engine in the new, well, the current Speed Triple, but that is rather underplaying the number of changes that have been made to it. I think it's the same as in it's the same crankcases and the same capacity, and I think it's the same bore and stroke, give or take, but thereafter the changes are more greater than the similarities, really. So what we have, the big change with this engine then, is obviously it's got a T-plane crank, which the Speed Triple hasn't. T-plane crank, first introduced on the Tiger 900 a couple of years ago. I'll just kind of briefly describe the philosophy of it if you want. So in a standard triple, for example in the Speed Trip, the crank pins are arranged at 120 degrees around the crank, which is sort of equidistant, if you like, for 3 cylinders, in the shape of I always think it looks like a bit like a CND logo or a pair of Y fronts, you know, kind of like that. And then and that gives you a very smooth, even firing interval. If you like, it's a triplet feel, like a waltz. It's a 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 with smooth running engine. Now the point of the T-plane was to introduce a bit of grumbliness, a bit of low down traction in the dirt, lower revs, and a bit more character, a bit more kind of vibiness to the motor. And so the T-plane crank, which was genuinely unique, no one had ever done it before. Most ideas in motorcycling, engineering ideas, are copied from something that somebody did in a shed back in the 1920s. I think in the case of the T-plane crank, I'd never heard of it before anyway. Anyway, so T-plane crank is as it suggests. So if you look at the crank end on, instead of like a pair of Y fronts, what you've got is the shape of a T. So you have a crank pin at 0 degrees, one at 90 degrees, one at 180 degrees, and then nothing, a whole long big gap of nothing. So in terms of the firing interval, what that means is you get an offbeat kind of feel. You get a 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. So it's uneven. Now that introduces vibration. Now there's good vibration and bad vibration. Good vibration is that charismatic stuff that you get from singles and V-twins and that lovely sort of lumping, lolloping, rollicking kind of vibes. Or you can have horrible vibration, usually secondary vibration, which is that nasty inline 4 buzzy, tingling, gives you white finger, makes your toes go numb. And so Triumph had to kind of thread the eye of this vibration needle. And on the Tiger 900, yes, it did have more vibration lower down that felt charismatic, felt like it gave the Tiger 9 more traction off-road. But I was a little bit concerned on that launch that the vibration might annoy some people when you start to get up at 5,000-6,000 RPM, because it starts to turn into not a buzz, but just the frequency obviously increases, and it's just a little bit kind of, it might annoy people. To be fair, I've heard nobody not even mention it or complain about it. So that was just me being a little bit overcautious. It didn't bother me. I've ridden a Tiger 900 all over Scotland, over Wales, all over Northern Ireland, you know, literally thousands of miles. yes, you can feel the vibration. No, it's not a problem for me. I just wondered if it would be for other people. Doesn't appear to be. There's a few damp spots on this road. Careful. So how does that upscale into the 1200? That's the sort of the big question. Are those vibes going to be better or worse? Well, I'm not sure, because we didn't have super technical Triumph people on the launch. I think they've done extra work on controlling and managing that vibration, and I have to say, I'll talk more about it much later on, but first impressions are, this feels kind of a bit like a parallel twin kind of vibration. It certainly doesn't feel like it will be annoying. It feels like it vibrates less harshly, if you like, than the Tiger 900. So I don't know if, if Triumph, I'll find out if they've done some work to manage the vibes a bit better. But no, this feels really, really, really nice. But I'm not talking about how it feels. I'll talk about all that later on. I'm still describing specs. So T-plane crank in this engine. It said 148 horsepower, 96 pound-foot of torque. You'll note that the 148 horsepower is more than what Triumph initially described as the sort of the other shaft drive bike in this category. But last night they absolutely pulled the gloves off. Now in the past, and mentioned BMW by name and the bike by name, this has got to be better than the 1250 GS in so many different targets. Hello, front tyre pressure, check manual. Oh, just seen that pop up. Well, I will check the manual. Let's have a quick squeeze. We've got a puncture on the front. Oh, it's gone away again. There you go, pump the brakes and it disappears. I wonder what that was for. Anyway, where was I? Before I was distracted by warning messages. Yes, they're quite explicit. Gloves are off. I think on a past launch, many years ago, a Triumph employee actually was disciplined or got in a bit of trouble because he mentioned BMW by name, and that wasn't sort of very well regarded. No, this time, totally different. Yep, we're up against the 1250 GS, and we're better than the 1250 GS in so many categories. And the first category is more power. This makes more power than the GS. It doesn't make more torque, courtesy of the fact that it's a triple and not a... that front does feel a bit wishy-washy. I'm going to be a little bit cautious about that. I don't like seeing warning signals flash up telling you you're losing pressure in the front tyre. Presumably it would stay up if it still thought that was the case. So there we go. So yes, explicitly taking on BMW in the power stakes. 140 brake horsepower, 148. I mean, I could be wrong. It definitely hasn't got the bottom end shove of the GS, and it definitely has got more top end. But I will tell you, it's not as electrifying as the V4, the Multistrada V4, and it's not as electrifying as the KTM 1290 Super Adventure. I mean, those boys still have got the peak power taken care of, but there's plenty there. It does feel smooth. Okay, so engines. I beg your pardon. Let's carry on with this. I'm drifting away. So what else have we got that's common across all the model ranges? So we have the same new aluminium trellis frame. We have an aluminium detachable subframe. We have Brembo Stylema calipers at the front, brake calipers. We have Magura levers, which are super sexy. In fact, everything is new. We have new clocks, we have electronics which have got more capacity, more features, more functions. Maybe one thing that is similar is this one-hand adjustable screen, which is super easy to move, and it's actually really good. Just back then on the motorway, with the screen up, it actually does really introduce a little pool of still air. It's very good. It's got a bit of go in it, hasn't it? So yeah, and of course it's got semi-active shower suspension on all the models in the range, which also has I mean, obviously there are sort of super deep algorithms that change the semi-active range of operation according to your riding modes and all that other malarkey, which is all standard for most sort of semi-active bikes these days. But the one thing Triumph did mention, which I've not heard before, is that it has got self-leveling preload. So the preload will adjust according to the payload, the weight of your luggage and your bum on the seat. But they also said that it changes the damping algorithm according to the payload as well, which maybe all semi-active that has self-leveling preload does that as well, but I've never heard it mentioned before. And I did say to Triumph, is that a unique thing for you? And they said, well, we're not sure. We thought, if it was unique, we'd probably say that it was unique. So I don't know, maybe other manufacturers have it, I've just not heard about it. But anyway, what it does show is a pretty serious intent, a pretty deep level of sophistication in the suspension. And it's certainly handling pretty tightly as well. So let's talk about the differences between the different models then, and I'll try and remember the prices as well. So what have we got? We've got 5 models. There's the base GT, which comes with semi-active, and it comes with the same dash and the same clocks. Hasn't quite got the same functionality, hasn't got an off-road mode, or hasn't got a custom mode, I don't think, in the base bike. And it hasn't got all the little extras like the quick shifter, heated grips, heated seat, centre stand. It's basically the bare bones bike. And that's £14,600, which is quite an attractive bare bones price. But it is very much a starting price. Then you get, like other Tigers, it splits into 2. You get the GTs and you get the rallies. The GTs are your more road-based, with your 19-inch front wheel and a slightly lower seat height. I think the seat height on the GT is 850 to 875 millimetres, and then on the rallies it goes from 875 to 895. 895 is pretty tall. This is the Rally Explorer that I'm on, and it, yeah, even at my 6 foot, it's a bit of a tiptoe to get my feet down. Anyway, so that's the GTs. There's the GT Pro, which is the sort of next one up from the base spec GT, and then there's the GT Explorer, which is the 30-litre tank version and comes with this blind spot, rear blind spot detection system. Oh, look at that, a lovely engine. And then there are the rallies, which have the 21-inch front wheels. Again, share much of the same spec, same engine, same suspension, all that kind of stuff. Steering geometry is slightly more aggressive because of the change in ride height. It's got, I think, about 20mm extra ride height. And like I say, the seat height is slightly taller as well. And then you get the Explorer version. So there's the GT Explorer and there's the Rally Explorer. And those guys there, let's say, they're the fellas with the 30-litre tanks, the blind spot rear detection. Now the extra capacity is added on the tank. I don't know if you can see that if I'm looking at it, just at the base here. So on the Explorer, the 30 litres comes here, and then on the standard bike, the Pros, there's like a plastic infill there. So that's where most of the extra tank capacity comes from, which is actually a really good idea, because, I mean, although I think there is a bit extra at the side as well, because this is definitely a wider bike than the standard Pro. I'll tell you what, you get on a GS Adventure and you can really feel that extra weight of the tank. It's a huge, great thing. You get on this and really, if you told me this was a 30-litre tank, I'd say no, it's not, it's a 20. It feels like a 20-litre tank between your legs, and to steer as well. And the other thing is this 21-inch front on this, the Rally. Normally you get on a 21-inch front and you can feel it's on the end of long forks and it's a bit wandering and a bit spindly. Let's make a go for it. This doesn't feel like that at all. This feels like it's got, again, you know, if you told me this was a 19-inch front, I wouldn't argue with you. I mean, at least it's just a little bit damp. It's not brilliant. Yeah, I mean, the suspension is being held really nicely in position. When you're rolling on, just in terms of that, when you hit the brakes, you have got some fork travel there. But just in terms of throttle control and bike movement when you're moving from side to side, this suspension feels really good. I'm trying not to swear. It feels awesome. So, did we finish talking about prices? I don't think we did. Let's have a bit more of a price chat. So, base model, £14,600, and then the GT Pro, next step up, which comes with cruise control and a quick shifter and a centre stand and the extra modes, heated grips over the base bike, is £16,700, and then the GT Explorer with the 30-litre tank and the blind spot rear detection is £18,100. Oh, some cyclists here, excuse me, gentlemen and ladies, there we go, thank you. Then you get the rallies, and the rallies start at well, £1,000 more expensive basically, so that's £17,700 for the Rally Pro and £19,100 for the Rally Explorer. Now, Triumph say in terms of price, and I haven't checked this, so you can take their word for it, they're probably not lying, that whatever the equivalent spec of GS is, so whether you buy, you know, to kit the two bikes and make them the same spec, the Triumph is always at least a couple of £100 cheaper. which was one of their targets. And that is one of the reasons they say they didn't add, they've got blind spot radar, they haven't got forward-facing radar for adaptive cruise control. And they said the reason for that was twofold. The first one is, when they asked customers, they weren't that fussed about it. It was one of those things that, yeah, if it's got it, it's nice, and not that bothered if it hasn't. And then when you factor that into the actual cost of adding adaptive cruise control, it made the bike more expensive than Triumph's target. So they left it off. Which, again, you've got to admire their honesty. That's kind of fair enough. The other place that Triumph say that they beat the GS is in weight. So again, whatever the spec of the bike is, it weighs substantially less. Like we're talking up to 17 kilos, I think, in some cases, less than a GS. And I'll tell you what, you can kind of feel it as well. This bike does not feel massive. It hasn't got that same, like, I mean, you know, which you could see as a criticism really, but it's not as massive as a GS Adventure, no way. This fuel range hasn't changed actually, so we've probably done the best part of 30 or 40 miles, and it said 250 mile range when I set off this morning and the tank was full, and it still showed 245 miles now. So I think, you know, I'm not sure what Triumph claim. I think they're claiming like 300 miles out of this tank, which probably isn't impossible. Oh, here we go. So there we go. Good grief. There's so much to remember. What else is there to tell? Loads of things I haven't told you about. I could tell you about 3 years warranty. I could tell you about 10,000 mile service intervals. I could tell you about, I told you about my Gura levers, didn't I? And I could rattle on a little bit about the engine, but I'm going to save all that for when I've ridden the bike a bit further. But at the moment, it's looking good. I'm really trying hard not to swear, because I'm very impressed by this. The only thing I will say, that I can say right off the bat, it doesn't quite have the bottom end grunt. That's the thing. It hasn't got the top end blitz of the Multistradas, the V4 Multistrada. Whoa, a bit slippy there. And it hasn't got the bottom end shove of the BMW. It is sort of somewhere in between. And if you specifically want those characteristics, then you'd be questioning. But I'll tell you what, in every other respect, certainly in terms of handling, it's classic Triumph. It's really good. Well, there is just one further thing to add, which is a tiny little thing I've forgotten about. Obviously, it's shaft drive. Hooray! New shaft drive, new swing arm, that sort of triangulated swing arm, which is lighter than before and more durable, of course. It doesn't even feel like a shaft drive, to be perfectly honest. Again, it's another thing. If you told me, if you said, is this chain drive or shaft drive, I wouldn't actually be able to tell you, because it doesn't feel like a shaft. In the sense, it hasn't got that kind of, I don't know, there's always a sort of a weight attached to the swing arm. Well, literally the wheel, I suppose. But when you go over bumps, you can kind of feel that the extra inertia by the wheel moving about. This hasn't got that at all. It's wow, this is something else. This is I mean, you know, it's one of these bikes where you get on and you think, could I live with this bike? yeah, this will be your lifetime bike. I'll take this fella. Good, right, let's have a little bit more riding, a little bit less waffling, and come back to you later on with some more conclusions about the new Tiger 1200.
Right, this is kind of the halfway point on the launch of the 2022 Tiger 1200, and I've ridden the GT Explorer on the road with its 30 litre tank and its 19-inch front, and I've ridden the Rally Explorer on the road with its 21-inch front and its 30 litre tank. And we're getting towards the end of the sort of road section of the launch. Tomorrow we're off-road, so I'll do a full conclusion at the end of that. Although we'll see how we get on off-road with these things. On the road, there's not a lot to complain about. Seriously, this is a really, really well-developed bike. It's almost like every iteration of the Tiger 1200, Triumph have made it a little bit better and a little bit better. This is getting towards the perfection, really, in the sense that the ride of the bike is as good as it gets. The suspension, the way, even on the Rally, the way it holds the bike level, when you're even under fierce braking, it kind of knows what you're going to be doing. It's almost like it can see that hairpin coming, and it beefs up the front end. It's got a really level feel to it. It doesn't feel like it's on the end of long travel forks and a 21-inch front. Very much, I'm thinking of other bikes that do have 21-inch fronts, like the Tiger 900, like the Africa Twin. They both have that kind of, you're very aware of the fact that you've got this sort of spindly front tyre and it's down there somewhere. Great handling, but you kind of ride it slightly differently. Certainly with the Explorer with its 19-inch front, it rides like a normal road bike. But even the Rally version is hard to tell you got a 21-inch front on there. It's really, really good. Engine is deeply impressive. Because it's 1160cc, it hasn't got the bottom end shunt of the twins like the KTM 1290 Super Adventure or the 1250 GS, and it hasn't got the top end rah of the Multistrada, the Ducati Multistrada V4, and it is that triple thing where it's kind of in between the two, and you can either say it's kind of got a little bit of the best of both worlds, or you could kind of say it's not really got the best of either end, but it sits in the middle. 148 horsepower. More power than a 1250 GS, not as much as KTM and the Ducati, but it's certainly not lacking on the road. You do have to cog it down if you really want to get it to fly. It's very definitely an engine that's come from a kind of a sporting heritage almost, if you like, and maybe if it had been developed separately as a 1250 or something with a little bit more capacity, then that may have suited its purpose a bit more, but really that's an observation rather than a criticism. For the rest of the bike, the steering, the suspension, especially semi-active now. I'm not sure, like I say, as I said in the sort of the onboard commentary, I'm not sure whether other manufacturers claim that the self-adapting preload at the back also adapts the damping to payload. But the way this thing balances front to rear, even when you're hard on the brakes, the suspension is really a good job at second-guessing what you want and giving you what you want. They even say that if you're crazy enough to jump this thing off-road, then the suspension knows that it's both wheels are off the ground and will set itself up before you hit the ground for a landing, which is quite impressive. I'm not going to test that, trust me. I hope not to anyway. So far, and it's a really civilised ride. The screen is really effective. These little wind guards here are really effective. It's easy to move up and down, with one hand. That's a piece of cake. It's not like the NT1100, which is a bit of a wrestling match. This thing's really, really easy to move. Blind spot detection, the little amber lights flashing on the mirrors. Can't tell at night, obviously. During the day, it's not a distraction. You can see them going off, but it's not kind of something, oh, someone's behind me, which actually, come to think of it, it's probably not a good thing, because you do want distracting. That's the whole point of them. But anyway, it's not distracting while you ride, that's for sure. What else was I going to talk about? Just a quick thing also about seat heights. So the GT Explorer, this is actually on its high setting, which I think is about 875mm, which kind of feels about right to me. The Rally Explorer I was riding this morning was set on its, I think it's 895mm, its tall setting. And I'm 6 foot, and that was kind of like, no higher than that. There are some guys who aren't 6 foot here who's like, I'm not riding that. Choose your seat height with care. So, yes, so far, it's a resounding success. On the road, it's astonishing. So, let's go and play off-road, see how we get on. So there we are. That's the end of 2 days of riding on Triumph's 2022 Tiger 1200 on the 4 different models. Today we've been off-road, as you can probably see, on the Tiger Rally Pro, 20 litre version, 21 inch front wheel, 20 litre tank. This one's been sort of like specially set up for off-road. It's had the rubbers taken out of the footrests. It's had the seat height lowered. I think it's had the bars turned up a little bit. So it's sort of, oh, and it's on the, what tyres is it on? What are they? Oh, the Anarchies. So it's on the Anarchies as well. I suspect they're running at slightly low pressures. So optimised. Oh, it's had the centre stand taken off, and it didn't have a full tank of fuel either. So it's pretty much optimised for off-road to give it the best impression. So we've done the specs, we've talked about the prices, all that kind of stuff, which I'm going to put at the end of the video, so you'll be able to see that. I'm going to put all the matrix of options that you get when you get the GT Pro or you get the GT Explorer, and the differences between the Explorer and the Rally. I'll talk about them, but I'll put the full comprehensive spec at the end of the video, so you can look at that, pause it. In the meantime, let's just quickly cover this bike off-road. Now, you know, I'm what I call an enthusiastic amateur off-road. So it's kind of more gung-ho really than actual ability, and I get you know, pretty intimidated quite easily. So actually I think while you can get hero shots and you can get the hero riding, and those guys can probably evaluate the fine differences at the extremes of off-road riding on these bikes, these big super adventure bikes, I always think that I'm kind of more like you. I'm just your average road rider who quite fancies a bit of off-road and like, where does that trail go? What's down that bit down there? And you know, would like to have a bit more ability, but the confidence is the big issue, especially taking a big, let's face it, pretty expensive bike like this off-road that you could quite easily damage. Yay! You okay? Number one. Yeah, you're good.
Sure.
Yeah, I just saw that rat at the last minute. It's like, fuck! And so my judgment on these things, having ridden things like KTM's 1290 Super Adventure Off-Road, the GS I've taken off-road, Honda's Africa Twin, and things like the Tenere 700 right at the other end of the scale, it gives you a kind of a broad picture of how this thing copes off-road for an enthusiastic amateur. And I have to say, it's really good. It's much closer to the Tiger 900 than it is to the old Tiger 1200 in terms of its balance, in terms of its poise, in terms of its lightness, the width of the thing. It's quite narrow. It's very Tiger 900. It doesn't feel like a 1200. At the same time, it's still got kind of road orientated DNA. When you ride a KTM, especially one that's been kind of set up to be ridden off-road, you can really feel that it's got off-road written all the way through it. This bike is capable. I'd probably rather ride this than a GS just because it's lighter and it's more kind of conventional in some way in its off-road ability. So yeah, so off-road, plenty of confidence. I think the kind of trails that we've been riding today, which are fairly just sort of like tight packed dirt trails, nothing too gnarly, I'd be quite happy to ride to Portugal and try these kinds of trails, confident in my knowledge that I'm not going to end up in a ditch. So yeah, I mean, there's a couple of little things. I was riding it predominantly in off-road mode, not off-road pro, which I think disables all the rider aids, whereas when, apart from maybe S at the front, I think that stays on whatever. But just in plain off-road mode, so you've still got limited traction control, I think, you've still got sort of various other safety aids. But if I put it in the rain mapping in off-road mode, that was actually quite nice to use. It was quite a softer power delivery. So for someone like me, a little tip if you do take one of these off-road and you're a bit kind of like, oh, I'm not sure about this, stick it in rain map. And what that does show is how deeply you can program these things. You can get right into those menus and make it do the things you want it to do. I mean, don't even talk about suspension. The amount of settings that you can set up in this thing is bewildering. Like I say, look at the end and I'll have the full matrix. Something else that impressed me actually was talking to someone this morning, one of the guys from the factory, who pointed out, I assumed that this frame was common to the GT, the road version, and the Rally. It would make sense if you were building the frame, make the same frame and compromise it for on-road and off-road. They haven't done that. This is actually a different frame. So the Rallys, not only over the GTs, they have sort of like lots of differences in terms of the 21-inch front, a few other bits and bobs, different steering geometry because they have a different frame. Obviously with more ride height as well. But I was quite impressed by that. And their phrase was, we didn't want to compromise. We wanted to make this thing so that it worked off-road. And to be honest, that's why the Rally Explorer and the Rally Pro on-road, the 21-inch front, you can't really tell it's a 21-inch front. It feels like a 19 for all the world. It's so good on the road. It's not like any other 21-inch front bike I've ridden, which is, again, deeply impressive. So as an overall conclusion then, I mean, here we are at the Vim Motors Off-Road Centre in Portugal, and these are the only models that we've got here. Yesterday we were riding the 2 GT, the GT Pro and the GT Explorer on the road, and people are still riding around. And so let's have some sort of broad conclusion. We've done all the specs. Engine is a rather wonderful thing. It feels vibey. It's got those vibes from the T-plane crank, but it doesn't feel as intrusive as it did on the Tiger 900, so I don't think there's going to be any complaints about that. In terms of performance, 148 horsepower, it's got plenty of go in it. You can look at it two ways. You can say it hasn't got the bottom end whoomp of the BMW and the KTM because it is only 1160, it's not a bigger motor, and it hasn't got the top end wah of the V4 Multistrada. But it is a compromise, and it's a good compromise. It's kind of got a bit of both, but it sort of sits in the middle. It's a great road engine. It's certainly got no flaws, no character that you're likely to complain about. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing to use. Power builds steadily. It's really easy controllable. You know, the throttle control is fantastic. Again, there are so many ways you can go in and change the throttle fueling or the throttle mapping to suit your preferences. In terms of comfort, which I haven't talked about, we did 176 miles yesterday on the road with nary an ache. It was really good. This seat doesn't cup you like a GS does. A GS has a sort of way of holding you on position. This, you can move around a bit, and the seat doesn't look quite as ergonomically sculpted. It's quite a thick old thing as well. It's quite chunky. But, mate, it was comfortable, really comfortable. Screen, super easy to adjust, which is really good. And it kind of makes a difference when you pull it up. It cuts all that top end noise out, the high frequency wind noise, but it keeps the bottom end, that kind of rumble. You still get that through there. I can see a lot of guys will be fitting MRA little flip up screens, trying to do one themselves, I think, just to tailor it to your own preferences. What else can we say about the road riding yesterday? So yeah, the handling is magnificent. It's really good. This Showa semi-active, I mean, presumably they're developing it all the time. The last time I think I rode Showa semi-active was on the Africa Twin Adventure Sport, which had it. And I was impressed by that then. This is so cool because they actually, Triumph used in the press release, they use the word skyhook, which is interesting because I kind of thought that was Ducati's thing, calling it skyhook, but the principle is the same. The suspension suspends the bike and balances it. And it really does. When you're using the throttle and you're on and off the throttle, the thing doesn't pitch extremely. Hit the brakes and it will pitch, for sure. But just gently rolling around on the road, it feels really composed. The ride quality is supreme. Again, like I said, I wouldn't have known that it had shaft drive unless somebody said, or you look at it, because it's so light. And it's quite distinctive. I think it's quite attractive, the whole kind of triangulation of that thing. It's quite unique, and it's a good point. What else have we got? So yeah, ride quality is really good. Handling. My personal preference is actually for the Rally Explorer on the road. I like the slightly taller riding position. It's I think I had it on the high seat setting, which was 895, which is tippy toes, but I preferred that. It gives you a more dominant position. The bars were in just the right place. Sometimes I get on GSs if I haven't ridden one for a while and think, blimey, these bars are really wide. I'd kind of forgotten. These things don't feel like that. They feel perfectly natural. What else can we say? There were a couple of things. Let me think of things that I don't like, and there aren't many. The mirrors. Now, on the Explorers, the 30-litre tank versions, they're the ones with the radar blind spot detection, with a little kind of unit at the back here that fills in this space, and they have a little amber warning light here. The mirrors blurred a hell of a lot on the road. They were very, very blurry. They got really thick mirror stems, but at any speed, the bikes, anything following you, it wasn't unrecognisable. It wasn't like a circular blur. It was just kind of like, yeah, it's not great. Whereas these mirrors, which are just standard mirrors on the Pro, the GT Pro and the Rally Pro, don't appear to do that. They're much clearer, which is an interesting thing. I don't know whether there's more mass or something, or in the Explorer mirrors, but they certainly blur a bit more. Unfortunately, you can't de-spec them. They're what comes with the Explorer. So if you buy your 30-litre tank, then you get those mirrors. And other irritations, there aren't really. Triumph's build quality, at least its finish quality, is really good. These things look, the component quality is really high. I suppose another criticism is one of the things about riding a GSA, although it is massive, and you always know it's massive in terms of its presence, it has, when you look at it from the front, you just kind of go, well, that does look like big is better. It really does look pretty cool. Now, obviously taking it off-road is a different issue, and pushing it around in a gravel car park is a different issue. The way Triumph have compacted this tank and added this sort of extra 10 litres in this area here on the Explorers is impressive. It does not feel like a 30-litre tank. It has not got that sense of awe-inspiring mass that you get with the GSA. It's not necessarily a good thing. Mostly it's a good thing, but I can imagine some people kind of like the sheer scale of the GS. It's got that kind of bigger is better thing going on somehow. And some people don't like it. Some people wish that it was the same bike, but just a bit slimmer and a bit lighter. Well, that's what this is. So yeah, so there we go. That's kind of a roundup. I'm trying to think of other things. I mean, braking. It's pretty fierce, but again, easily controllable. These Magura levers, which you can set up obviously with lever span. I'm not sure if you can do the lever ratio. No, you don't think you can, just spans. And the Brembo styling calipers, they've got a lot of stopping performance. If you really hammer them on the rally versions on the road, you can really feel the front digging in and starting to make those forks walk a little bit. But boy, it stops. I'm trying to think of what else. I think that's about it. Right, leave comments below. I'll answer them as I always do, at least for a couple of months. So ask any questions. I'm sure there's tons of stuff I've forgotten. I'm going to put a whole load of spec at the end so you can have a look through that rather than me tell you. It's much easier and much more pleasant, I think, to probably just look at it. Yeah, so I suppose overall, what are the questions? Is it better than a GS? It's as good as. In some areas it's better. Triumph maintain that it's cheaper if you spec one of these to the same spec as a GS or a GSA, then the Tigers work out cheaper by a few £100. Okay, in terms of targets, they say they're lighter spec for spec than the BMW. So it's kind of achieved those things. It handles differently. A GS has a real kind of planted, rolling, low centre of gravity sensation on the road, which is pretty awesome, to be honest. The thing just feels like it won't budge. You turn it, it's light steering, but it's got a real kind of solid feeling to its handling. This is a lot more agile, a lot more active is the wrong word, but it's much more, I don't know, maybe like a normal motorbike. It just feels more agile and lighter, not quite as substantial. Again, you know, you could say that's a good thing, or you could say that's a bad thing. But yeah, relative to the GS, it's at least as good, better in some respects. If you like twins and you like that bottom end surge of a 1254cc flat twin, or whatever size the 1290, the 1290 Super Adventure V-twin is, then you're not going to get that from this. You're getting close, but it's not there yet. Equally, if you want that sort of super crazy, smooth top end rush of a V4 from the Multistrada, this doesn't make 160, 170 horsepower, 150, 148. But as a compromiser, somewhere in between, it's really good. It's really, really good. I'd like to try one of these with full luggage and go for a proper tour on it. But there we go. Comments down below. Thank you very much for watching and putting up with my nonsense rabbiting. And check everything out on bikesocial.co.uk. Get your insurance with Bennett's. It's worthwhile. And thank you very much for watching. Sorry about that, that got a bit giddy, didn't it? That got a bit hectic.
How the hell you made that bridge, I do not know.
Sorry, that's not my normal thing.